Good morning. Welcome to Monday meeting. Kathy, I see you're ready. We'll just start right in.
Yeah, Kathy Funk Baxter, excuse me, Finance Director. We have just juvenile detention and juvenile probation to discuss on their financials this morning. So I'll have a pull up. Okay. Juvenile detention is a fund that's part of the general fund, and so their revenues and expenses will not match. It's supported by the general fund primarily. They do have some revenues budgeted. They have intergovernmental budgeted for $1,000. They don't have anything received yet on that. And then goods and services, they have $55,500 budgeted. They've received $37,162 so far. And then on miscellaneous, they didn't have anything budgeted, but they did receive some funds, 906. And we typically amend revenue budgets in the third quarter, so we'll be amending it at that time. So they're well ahead of their budget projections on their goods and services. Going to expenses. So expenses for juvenile detention is primarily their personnel. They have budgeted $2,810,965. Their actual so far is $854,468. And so they're showing a bit below their the target of what we would say for this time. This is primarily through the month of April as far as expenses go. It was pulled just last week, these numbers. We did see when we analyzed a little bit in our personnel, and I'll talk about it in a minute, but we noticed that their overtime budget, their overtime expenses are higher than their budget. And I do have a handout. I'm sorry, I didn't give it to you.
Thank you.
I know that you had, when we did the budget for 2025, y'all had approved 2 new positions, and y'all were concerned about the overtime at that time. And so, we did some analysis, and the overtime for the 4 months last year was $103,231. For this year, so far, it's $129,647. So their handout that they provided talks about some of the reasons why for that. And they also still have vacancies according to our records, and we count some of their part-time help because they're budgeted in the system. So they are actually have 3.75 open positions. So that probably is contributing to this as well. Probably some of the primary reasons. We just dug into this a little bit more. And one of the things is that we just in some of our sampling, we believe that there's some incorrect, possibly some incorrect coding. There's some situations where we looked at when we pulled some samples where some people may have not done their time cards correct, and we actually may owe them overtime money. And then there's others that may have done their time card incorrectly. We're recommending that we're going to look more at this, and but we are recommending that we probably need a timesheet training and to go over some of the timesheets more specifically with the department and then also with the individuals filling out their timesheets. So
I remember last year, and I don't recall new positions. I recall reclassification of existing.
yes,
Positions
two
and-
positions were in probation, and those were vacated and eliminated. And then 2 positions were added to detention to help with the lead supervisor, lead
Right.
officer positions.
Because we had people that weren't leads running, and that's where all the overtime come into, and then changing them to leads should have reduced some of that overtime, but I'm not seeing a reduction, obviously.
Yeah. First off, I think that the document that they gave you explains that some of the reasons why they still have vacancies. And so they
I
have
haven't had a
vacancies.
chance. I just got the document this morning, so I
Yeah.
really haven't had a chance to look through it.
Most of the vacancies right now are in the officer positions as well as in their part-time positions. So, and then when they're utilizing an employee that already works for the county, which they have a couple of those in the extra help category, because the employee already works for the county, their hours most of the time will show up as overtime on the extra help. So then they also provided information about all of their admissions to the juvenile on that same thing that this sheet that I just handed out of the cases that they handle, and 23 versus 24. And these are for the full year, are very similar numbers as far as the number of cases.
Yeah.
On the, can we talk about this chart real quick? What exactly is an extra pay lead position?
Oops. I don't think I got to keep one of those, but thanks.
What chart are we on?
Where are you at? Where'd you look at?
This line chart here.
This one.
Okay, so the extra pay, page 4, there you go.
No, push the button and then state your name.
I'm Mike Schultz, the juvenile detention manager. So what I did when we received these positions last year, I knew that all of our overtime comes out of one pool, and the replacement or getting those lead positions, I needed to track any extra pay attached to the lead positions we created separately from just regular overtime. So the extra lead, so anytime a lead position is vacant, it either needs to be picked up by another lead at lead overtime, or an officer that's been trained as an OIC or officer in charge has to pick up that post. So that's all extra pay that they get for taking, that's an out of class pay code. So if the lead position is vacant and an officer that's qualified as an OIC comes in, picks that up as overtime, then it goes in as coded as out of class overtime, which then comes out of my overtime budget. If an officer that's on duty is OIC qualified, they will step into that role and get out of class pay, but then their post is now vacated and has to be filled with overtime. So I attached that overtime also into these numbers because that's directly associated to that open lead position. We weren't able to hire and not hire, but promote until March because our staffing, we started with 5 open positions. I had to get staffing up to enough to where I could actually pull those people out of the officer rotation to put them into that. So it took us a while to even get promotions in place. But then we also had to hire staff to backfill. So starting April, going into May was when we first will start to really see the impact of that. But we've shown all costs that are not regular pay for that post, for the lead position post, on a steady decline from the beginning of the year to now. because those are now being filled by people in those posts, not filled with overtime, not filled with back, logging people. And so the majority of our like overtime usage is related to those open officer positions. About half of my part-time staff work for other parts of the county, so almost all of their pay comes out of my overtime budget. When we do training for brand new hires, it's about 200 hours of training, and unfortunately, my staff that are qualified to do that training also were the ones that promoted into the lead spots. So that creates some trickle down to where they have to do the training. It is overtime because they plug into an empty spot to do the training, but then their spot has to be backfilled. So we're just playing catch up. May was supposed to be my month where we're starting to see the benefits of hiring our new staff, the new leads put in place, and our numbers are reflecting that so far this month.
What do we attribute the increase in February to?
In February, on which part of it?
So
Your overtime,
the actual.
Mhm.
302%.
This is what they were for last year. This is what they were for this year.
February would be, we were training 2 officers at the same time, which we've decided is not a good thing for us to do because it does put a lot of strain on the staff doing the training. It does require, again, that overtime to train them. So now we've started where we're spacing them out. We only will hire one at a time, get them through the training. The next one starts right as they finish their training because they do not get certified by the state until right now. It's about a year to a year and a half backlog. So we have to do a really good in-house training to make sure that they are qualified to be managing our juveniles in our center. And along with that too, our training, we have a training budget. So when an officer is doing is a trainer, they're supposed to use a special pay code. And then they also have to use special pay overtime code, depending on whether they're working on shift or whether they're picked up overtime to do the training. And we just recently found out when we started putting this together, that all of that coding doesn't come out of my training budget. It comes out of my overtime budget. So any of our coding that has overtime attached to it, even if I have a line item that's specifically for that, if it's regular pay, if it's overtime, it comes out of my overtime budget and not that line item.
So this chart shows the reduction in hours that you have in your extra pay leave. In October of 2024, we were at 338, 610, and 418. And in May, we're at 6238 and 195. That's a pretty drastic reduction.
Yeah, and the May one, it's only half, it's through the 15th, but yeah, it's a drastic reduction. And a lot of that is because we now have some new people hired on. Right now, we are at the best staffing levels that we've been, but we're only going to now start seeing the results of that because we had to get them through that training portion first. And right after they finished the last one we had finished their training, the state gave us 3 spots in one of the academies. So 3 of our older staff that have not been certified by the state yet were gone for 2 weeks to do that training, which then meant all of theirs had to be backfilled as well.
So after the month of May, all the backfilled positions will be taken care of.
We will still have 2 open officer positions that will continue to need backfilled or with overtime. But everything else, yes, that should all just be regular pay beyond what it takes to fill those posts.
So if I understood what you said, the month of May represented on this graph is only 15 days.
Yes.
That's only half a month.
Mhm.
Okay.
How many juveniles do we have over there right now?
Sorry.
How many juveniles do we have over there right now?
This weekend we were at 15. And we
Okay.
had and that was another thing that's going to impact our overtime right now is there was a very complex event in the community that resulted in multiple juveniles that are co-defendants, co-conspirators, victim versus perpetrator. And so we can't house some of them together. So we've had to open up a third pod to be able to keep some of those separations so that we don't have an increase in violence or issues with court cases, things like that, which is another thing that will impact our overtime because we are not staffed for 3, we're staffed for 2 pods.
So I'm counting up 41 positions right now that are filled that cover the 15 juveniles in the 3 pods.
No, if with the 2 pods, we have 5 posts that need filled on day shift and afternoon shift and 4 posts that need filled on graves. And if I was at 100% staffing, I'd still be 24 hours shy every week of being able to staff those levels. Because the
I'm just
positions
using
just
your
haven't been
numbers
given to us.
here. Lead officer, you have 5 positions, 0 open.
Mhm.
Officer 16, especially 3 positions, and part-time staff 17. So that's, I'm counting 41 people.
Total, yes, for a 24/7 facility. Like I said, we're about 2/3 of a post shy of even being able to meet that at 100% if everything was filled at 100%.
So the facility is designed to hold how many people?
I want to say we are designed to hold 70 some odd people. That's how many beds we have, but that's not what we're staffed for. Not even close.
Okay, so what are you staffed for?
If we had 2 pods full, we would be able to house, let's say it's 16 per unit. So 16 to 18 per unit, so about 32 people, 36 people in that range. But if we have 1 female and 1 male, we still have to staff a person in each pod, plus a responder, plus a control room, plus a supervisor. So that's one of the things that makes it difficult when we start looking at the numbers of residents that we have in, because whether we have 2 kids or whether we have 36 kids, we still have to staff that the same.
So you're staffing right now, you could handle up to 36 kids.
If they're in the 2 pods, yes, but
Was our average resident number greater in 2024 than 2023?
I don't remember what our averages were for 2023. I want to say that it went up. I believe 2023 was 7 point something. Was our average population. We were at 10.2 for 2024. With a high of 23 kids last year. And I think a low of right around 4 or 5.
So on here where we have the cost per resident, it's averaged out at 10.2 for 2024. Obviously, the more residents we have, the less expensive that's going to be because our costs are what they are. But I'm looking at Thurston County is 800 a day, and theirs is around 10.
Which means that their overall cost is probably higher than ours.
Yeah. And Yakima's at 500 a day and theirs is at 20. So if our average resident was at 20, we're saying that ours would be at $400 per day.
That's where it should
Correct.
run out. Yeah. Yes. And a lot of those differences will come from pay rates. A lot of these other counties like Yakima, they pay at a higher rate than we do.
Well, the other thing that's gonna impact that number is our overtime.
Mhm.
So we get our overtime down, that cost per day goes down regardless of the number of inmates that we have.
Anything else? Or are you still perusing through the document? Yeah.
Got a lot of information there.
I'm good for right now.
I am too.
We have more questions. We shoot your way when we get a chance to look at it over. Okay.
And I would suggest, like they said, the 3 months has a lot of overtime from training is what I'm understanding. So maybe bringing them back, bringing their financials back in another 3 months to look at the trends there. And then also, like I said, their times are very complicated on their timesheets. And so there are some irregularities on some of them when we pulled samples. So I really believe that we need to create a training document and look at specifically for their area, but it is complicated on those timesheets. So.
Are you referring to the overpaid, extra paid employee and all that stuff is what complicates it?
It's because they have a lot of different, like he said, they have training, they have out of class, they have a lot of different categories that they have to put on their timesheets. And so I think, and then also their work week is a bit different depending upon which shifts they are on and everything. So anyway, so we're going to continue to look at their timesheets and develop some type of training.
Yeah. I think your 3 months suggestion makes sense.
Mhm.
I do have one question though, on the admissions portion of it right here. What are contracts?
Those are anytime that we house somebody from another county. We
Oh,
have
okay.
contracts with other counties, some contracts in Oregon.
Got it.
Okay, I'll continue on. Supplies, they're on track on they're a little bit ahead of their supplies based upon a 12-month target, but not significantly. And then their services, they're ahead of our target, but that's primarily because of those internal service billings that were done in January. So. That's it on that.
I do have one question, actually, it just popped in my mind. Somewhere in this, I read that the juvenile detention gives back 300 and some thousand to the general fund every year.
Back historically at our.
Yeah, you might come back. Sorry.
When you look back historically over the last 5 years with our budgeted amount and our actual expenditures amounts, that's the differences between there. And it's almost because corrections is the way corrections is, you typically almost always have turnover. So we always have a lot of open positions. They leave to go to adult corrections. They leave to go to probation. They go to the roadside. We get a lot of turnover every year. So our payroll budget, our regular payroll budget is historically been at least right around that much below what was budgeted. And then it offsets with some of the overtime, some of those other things, but we've come in under budget for the last 5 years.
So it's money not spent that was budgeted.
Yeah. And we see that more in more than just juveniles. Yeah.
But that's where last year, when we went into budget season, we made an adjustment from the one into the overtime to make the overtime budget whole. And I think the only way to not have to do that every year would be to ask for way more on our overtime budget than we project we'll need. But we don't really know until we know how many openings we're going to have, how much that's going to be. So that's where it's offset by what isn't spent in our regular payroll.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, probation. Juvenile probation. Okay, they have some revenues in their juvenile probation that are budgeted. Intergovernmental is by far their largest one, and that's budgeted at 406,179. They brought in 142,138. So that's primarily from I'm going to say Becca, if that's the correct pronunciation, but it's BECCA funding, and that comes in from the state, and it's used to provide intervention services, treatment, and support. And so that is showing above the target, slightly above the target. And then miscellaneous is 226,271 budget. They brought in 140,532. And I don't have an explanation on that one, but that one is above their target at this point. Their target was 75,000. They brought in 140,000 so far.
So you do have in miscellaneous that the.
Oh, I
140 is
see.
back up.
That's where the Becca is at, not in the intergovernmental. I'm sorry. Other financing sources, they receive some funds from mental health, the mental health or behavioral health tax, and those are transfers. And so currently the department has received funding through March, and they'll be billing for April soon. So that's budgeted $148,812 for the year. They brought in $34,299, and there's always going to be a lag because it's a reimbursement program. So
Kathy, do we know what the intergovernmental is?
I don't know. What intergovernmental contracts do y'all have? State, other than the Becca?
Most state.
Yeah, it's mostly state funds. Okay, going to their expenditures. They have budgeted in personnel 1,637,000. They brought in 450,000 basically. And so as far as on our target, they're a little bit They're actually below target for personnel at this point in time. They do, I think, yes, they have some vacancies right now. According to our records, they have 2 vacancies on probation. They have supplies budgeted at 19,900. They've expended a little over 5,000. So they're below their target. Services was budgeted 714,164. They've expended 395,824, and the majority of that is related to our January service billings for insurance and IT. 256 of that 395. So it's showing above, their expenditures are above target, but it's because of that January payment, large payment.
Are those 13 included in these positions you gave us in your paper? Or is this totally separate? Would that be
In
addition?
your handout, it's separate. Yeah, it's separate. And last year we were showing 4 vacancies, but that's because we had 2 positions that they eliminated at the end of the year.
Mhm. And refresh me, what was the budget on detention? I see probation is 1.6.
And detention personnel budget is 2.8.
And that's where detention is where the 41 plus whatever we're missing or trying to hire. And the other one is 13, okay. Okay,
And that's it. That's all I have for financials today.
do George, these are two separate functions? Say a county like Wahkiakum that doesn't have a juvenile center, do they still have a probation program?
Good morning, Commissioners. George Moya, Juvenile Court. I want to say Juvenile Court Administrator. They do.
Okay.
There's quite a few facilities around the state that just operate as a juvenile court, and because of the size of their facility, they don't have a detention center. So we do business with Pacific and Wahkiakum counties,
Right.
which are bordering counties that don't have a detention facility, but they do have a probation department. In fact, some of their probation officers wear multiple hats because they're such a small department.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Thank you.
I guess I'm finished on
Okay.
financials.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. So you're gonna schedule again 3 months down the road and we can take a look,
Yes.
see if that line's still going down?
Yeah, I'll schedule a 3-month review of the financials.
Okay,
So
I understand. What's Doug's schedule? Is he on? So wouldn't it? How many? Okay, we got Doug scheduled to come on at 9:44 45? Okay, let's try and do some of the agenda items, not for this week, for next week. Real quick. Gina, do you have time? Okay. Once again, these aren't for tomorrow, but they're for a week from tomorrow.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. So we have a couple of items that will be on for May 27th. These are, they're separate contract and amendments, but they're all sort of related in the sense that these are all existing contracts that we have currently in place. They are set to expire June 30th of this year. We're making some adjustments to some of these contracts to sort of finish up the year with these programs. We anticipate new state contracts starting July 1. And I do have a work session scheduled on June 4th with the board to kind of review what those look like for the new fiscal year. So one of the amendments that we have is with our contract with the Washington State Department of Commerce for our consolidated homeless grant. This amendment is removing $140,000 from our contract that we anticipate being unspent. Sometimes the state will reach out and see if you have funds that you anticipate won't be utilized, and they'll move that around and allocate it to other areas. So that's one of the amendments that's on the agenda, is just the state taking back a small portion that we anticipate being unspent.
So this original contract was a little over 8 million.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're showing there's 140 that's not going to be spent. So they're reallocating elsewhere.
Right.
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. We have two amendments that will be on the agenda related to our developmental disabilities services. The amendments on the agenda is to our contract with two providers. One is with Goodwill and one is with Compass Career Solutions. And with these services, what we see that happens throughout the year sometimes is that the service level changes, clients get authorized for additional hours, or they get new clients throughout the year. So we do our best at the beginning of the year to set the budget, and then we see some things shift around throughout the year. So that's why we're adding funds now just to finish out this year for them, as they've both seen some increase in hours, additional clients, and clients getting involved in other services as well. So that's why we're adding funds. These aren't additional funds that we're requesting from the state. They're funds we already have in our contract. We're just allocating to the providers to finish out the year.
So we have a big overall deal from the state, and we sit down with these people at the beginning and said, well, we should be somewhere around here. And we're finding out they're actually doing more. So we're just taking more of what that originally given and putting over here.
Yeah. Yeah. We try to hold an amount unallocated so that we can do this towards the end, because it seems to happen every year where we have this shifting in clients and services. So. And then the last one we'll have on the agenda is a contract with Cowlitz Family Health Center. This is related to the criminal justice treatment account funding. We get this funding from the state to sort of fill in a gap with substance use disorder treatment services that can be provided primarily to individuals who are participating in a therapeutic court program, mostly drug court. So this is a similar scenario where they provided some more inpatient services this year, which cost a little bit more. And so we're adding a little bit more funds. Again, it's not any additional funds that we requested from the state. It's funds we had unallocated for this year. So we're adding some funds just to finish up the year with them. So, and as I mentioned, I will be here June 4th for the work session. Hopefully I'll know more about what next year's contracts look like at that time, and we can talk a little bit more about that funding and what contracts we anticipate getting and what that looks like.
Everybody.
Any questions?
Seems pretty clear.
Questions Now.
Okay. Okay,
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Jordan, did you have something pretty quick on here? You're with there? Okay. We got finance. You have one on here? It's long? Oh, well, then we better hang on till we got Doug coming on in a couple minutes. So why don't we get ready for that? What's the going into executive session, the topic for it? Is it contract negotiations or what are we doing? What's he?
If I may, it's in regard to safety and security planning.
Okay,
I would say about 10 minutes.
okay. Thank you. Okay, we will adjourn to executive session for safety and security. We're estimating about 10 minutes.
The board is extending the executive session an additional 10 minutes.
The board is extending the executive session an additional 5 minutes.
Okay, back from executive session, no decisions were rendered. Public Works, go back to agenda items.
Good morning, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. At this point, I only have one guaranteed item on the agenda for next week. We have the bid award for the county-wide pavement overlay. The low bidder was Lakeside with a bid of $2,516,744. That is about $163,000 below the engineer's estimate. We had 3 bids this year, which is one more than we usually do. So we're asking to go ahead and award that. We are working with the state on the South Cloverdale project. That, because of the federal funding, has to have their approval before we can award it. So we may get it on. It all depends on if we get their approval this afternoon or tomorrow morning, in enough time for us to add it to the agenda. So those are the 2 from the Public Works Roads Department that may show up. And I know Sean and Savannah have several others.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sean Rowe, Public Works. First up, we have a contract completion for the Riverside Park overlay. That was the basketball courts and tennis courts from the end of last year. $72,000 and change on that one. Next up, we have the admin roof award for this building here. We had 7 bidders on that project, so a good amount, ranging from the low bidder at $423,752 with WeatherGuard, to the high bidder at a little over $972,000. So quite a wide range there as well. After that, we have the diesel agreement that we talked about earlier in the year, if you guys recall. At that point in time, we were looking at piggybacking off the state of Oregon contract. We pivoted at that point in time. The Port of Longview also did an award, and so we pivoted to that point. Still no delivery charge. And that would go through the February 25th of 2027. And so it's mainly going to be for the landfill, but as well for our county road shops and generators throughout the county that need to be filled. And then last up, which is going to probably tie into Kathy's stuff a little bit, is that we are requesting movement of one of our petty cash funds from the Purchasing Internal Service Fund, the 50901 fund, to the Purchasing General Fund and Department. And so it's an $800 checking account. We're looking at closing that fund. And so we're trying to move it to the general fund. So we still have access and can use it from that point forward. It's been helpful to have, especially being a checking account.
These are all items that will be on the 27th. They're just not on here yet. They'll be added to this. Okay.
I should say these are all most likely going to be on there, assuming contracts come back and everything like that.
Okay.
And that's all
And
from my side.
are those, do you expect them to come back as consent agenda items or motion items?
I would expect the roof and diesel contract to be motion. Petty cash and contract completion would probably be consent items.
Okay.
And that should be all for me. Unless you guys have any questions on those ones.
Good morning, Savannah Clement, Public Works. You'll also see on the agenda, if it's not listed already, a contract extension of 1 year for the AEDA contract, which is our architect and engineer on call. And we're asking to not only extend it by 1 year, but to increase it to up $200,000, sorry. So we have the current contract amount and we're asking for an increase of $200,000 in a 1 year extension. That $200,000 reflects all of our outstanding proposals. So that includes the HOJ feasibility study, the annex, completion. We have some parks rendering, and then we're anticipating costs because we don't have the proposals back yet for the juvenile roof, as well as the jail lobby. So those are two that we hope to be included in this contract extension amount, but we don't yet have those proposals back to have exact figures. Yes, it's a not to exceed. Mhm.
What's our, this will be 200,000 for this 1 year extension. How much have we
Yes.
usually been doing with these folks?
We haven't done a lot, and I can't recall the initial contract amount. Do you have it? We think it was 100,000, but these include the actual amounts that were quoted on the proposals. So I think the only thing we've actually paid is for that juvenile feasibility study, which happened last year. And then we've done some progress payments, but we haven't paid a lot out. So I think we have about half, if not more, of that contract still. So about, I'm quoting numbers, but I think about 50 to 60,000 still left on that contract.
Is it an increase up to 200,000 or
Yes.
an additional 200?
So it's an additional 200,000, which would make the total contract value 300,000.
And that's only for this year.
Correct. So if we don't spend that, then we won't spend it. It's not like a guaranteed amount. We're only going to spend what we ask them to do projects wise.
So after the extension, does it go back to 100,000 if that's what the original contract was?
So my guess, I think we had 2 one-year renewals on this master on-call contract. So we'd have 1 more year to continue to roll over. And then I would recommend going out to bid again, So there'd be the possibility to extend 1 more time and ask for more money if that's the case.
But you're getting a number of 200,000 just from cost estimates on the various projects we got going.
Yeah, which are actually, for the ones that we can account for, that we have numbers for, it's about 225,600. And so we've spent about 50. So we're asking for that total increase to be 300. Giving us a little bit of wiggle room for some of these projects that we don't know about.
They've done some good work for us. I mean, they do good work.
Yeah, I've been pretty happy working with them. They seem pretty reasonable when we push back on pricing and ask them to kind of reduce things or, so far so good.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have, and I know Kathy, you got a lot. I see Ian and I see Dana. Did you guys have things that aren't? Oh, so you're later with HR. How about you, Dana? Are you? Okay. Okay. So good. And I think we're on track. Our agenda isn't complete yet because we're trying to do it a week ahead. And so I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody.
Kathy Baxter, Finance Director. Mine is for finance. I'll have budget amendment and I handed it out to you, and I'll kind of go over the highlights of that, the large items. Didn't I hand out? No, I didn't. Sorry. I need to hand out.
Crazy.
Huh? Okay. I think a set is maybe one of these and maybe one of those. I guess. Everything. Short.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so this is for the 27th, May 27th. We'll have the budget amendment. So on general fund, after all revenues and expenses adjustments are made, we will be decreasing the general fund by $149,847. So I'll go over some of the major items that make up that. In the commissioners area, we're increasing our meals and lodging, tuition, and airfare, all to accommodate additional travel related for the commissioner's office. And so that's a total of $15,986. On the treasurer's office, basically they're needing an increase in office supplies for some additional tax statements that they needed to produce. These other ones are small, so I'm just going to skip over them. Basically, we also had the PO for our copier leases. We went through and we were trying to make sure that the PO matched the budget. And so we have some increases and decreases related to that. So you'll see that in the description column. So small adjustments. And then on page 2, I'll jump to page 2 for the sheriff's office. The main increase in their budget, which I think you've already heard, is the Superior Court was requesting an additional position to be at the jail for the court that's being offered there. And that would be an increase of $42,000 for that additional security. It would be part of the security contract. And then they also need to pay for an alarm system put in some of their evidence rooms. And that was approximately $13,000. So that's what the 55. They reduced their machinery equipment to cover the alarm part. And then there's $72,579 that they need to pay to IT. At the time we did the budget, we weren't sure if they were going to maintain their own equipment replacement account, so we didn't include it in the original budget. So that makes up their total of $114,579 request for a budget amendment. Yeah, so the rest of them are pretty small. They relate to that PO for the copier contracts. And then the prosecuting attorney, we actually have a decrease in their budget. We adjusted some of their salaries based upon actuals. Superior Court, there's a $9,000 increase. First quarter, we had one of our lines, we had our add and subtract wrong. So we're fixing that. And then on page 3, we have some increases, decreases that are minor related to the PO and things like that. Then Office of Public Defense, they had an opportunity for a new contract. And so that contract brings them 2 legal interns and will also have an increase in revenue to offset that, to more than offset that actually. So that's a $30,227 increase. On the coroner's office, we didn't anticipate in the budget their extra help that they needed, some additional extra help related to forensics. And so we're seeing our current budget's not sufficient to cover that. And so that's a $15,000 increase. Then they are also requesting in the minor equipment, $46,000. They have a quote. They actually have 2 quotes for some additional cameras in their area, exterior as well as interior. And so that's there. So their total is an increase to the general fund budget of $61,284.
These are security cameras?
Yes. And they would be cameras that would be added to our current software system, that the same software system we're using at the Hall of Justice.
you don't have any security cameras right now, so this is putting security cameras over there.
Mhm.
How did we miss that when we were building that? Okay.
Yeah.
That's just the cameras, right? This is just the camera system.
But that includes installation and everything set, ready to go.
Yeah, it includes the installation and everything. And like I said, the good news is we already have the software that we can utilize to monitor all the cameras. Mhm. The museum is requesting an increase in their budget. And the primary item here is their sign that's on Allen Street has been inoperable and since I think about September or anyway, it's going on over 6 months that they haven't had their sign. And so they're requesting 22,000 for that piece of equipment to get their sign back up and running. Moving on, page 4. We, of course, have some PO adjustment corrections. Then when you get to non-departmental, I believe at the last budget amendment, it was approved or at one of our business meetings that the Veterans Fund, their administrative cost would not be covered by the county. We'd actually asked for those to be covered by their investment income because they do have a fund balance instead. And so that's adjusting the budget down and not transferring out $38,099 that we had budgeted for that.
Just so I'm clear, we're not taking it out of the 1/10 of 1% or whatever that is that they
Yeah,
get.
no,
We're taking it out of those funds sitting in an interest-bearing account, and we're just taking it out of the earnings.
right. They have earnings sufficient to cover their administrative cost. And then our cafe has had some unusual expenditures in startup, and so we're requesting some additional funds to help support the cafe at the Hall of Justice. We started the program when they were on spring break, and we also have had some expenses related to the equipment and things like that that weren't anticipated in the original request for funding. So this is to supplement the cafe.
What page is that on, Kathy?
And where's that at?
Excuse me? It's under non-departmental. It'll be supplemented from the general fund.
On the miscellaneous O&M supplies?
Yes, that as well as the transfer out. Both of those items are related to the cafe. And we'll probably need to bring that back to y'all in a full financial analysis of it, how it's doing. We have 1 month completed. We'll have 2 months at the end of May that will have completed operations. And so I'd like to bring that back to y'all and show y'all how it's doing. But we've had some we've had adjusting the hours, things like that. So we've reduced our hours to try to reduce some of the expense right now. On parks, this is primarily related to an ARPA project that was approved for, I think, $95,000. Last year we finished up part of the project. Now the next part is doing all of the striping and stuff like that. And when we built the budget, we had closed it out, and I didn't anticipate there was additional expenses. So now we're bringing forward that we need to do that. And then there was some additional summer help, 3 total that were approved by the board and a personnel request. And so now we have to increase the budget for that by $10,000. And then on drug court, we have some miscellaneous items. Half of it's basically related to the PO, and then some of it's related to their number of licenses for case management under a new contract, so. Then when we get to revenues, like I said, some of their expenditures, we have revenue offsets. We're making some various adjustments for the mental health tax. And then some ARPA money coming in and that grant for OPD coming in. And then district court also wanted to increase their budget that they get for the interpreters. So a total increase of revenue of 80,139. Any questions about general fund?
Well, let me go back to, and just use parks as an example, because this was an ARPA project we were working on. When we, let's take, for example, we did the water meters, and that we set aside, I think, 500,000 in ARPA funds for that. We didn't spend 500,000 in ARPA funds. So is there a balance in there that can be applied to that?
Yes.
Is that what we're doing here, or is
Right.
that this
So-
covered out of general?
No, it's covered by a transfer in from ARPA. So you'll see the 29,000 increase in parks expense, but then I've got 29,000 in
Okay.
revenue.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just being clarified that we know that there's some over there and we can make those adjustments. Yeah,
Right.
okay.
Yep, because they had set aside the commitment of 95,000 and
Right.
anything else on the general fund? If not, I'll jump to page 5. In some cases, they're able to cover the increase within their own budget, and that's why you'll see a 0.
Mhm.
These are all special revenue funds or other, or service funds or enterprise funds that we'll be going over next. So roads had 2 summer help that were approved, additional small increases that were offset for law, library, and GIS. Veterans relief, that relates back to the fact that we're not going to transfer in 38,000 to them. And then also we reduced fund balance as an offset for them. Human services, this is part of the transitioning. They're going to be transitioning one fund, everything away from that one fund and over to 14,001. So this has to do with some additional contracts that have come in. They're budgeting for revenue primarily for this DSHS CGTA grant, and that's $1.25 million. And then another Department of DSHS, that's related to disabilities state grant of $147,000. So they'll have these increase in revenue, but they'll also on the next page have a corresponding increase in expenses. And their ending fund balance. So they're offset. And it looks like a lot, but they're moving, they're increasing certain line items to help cover the expenses that come with those grants. Any question on that?
When you say expenses that come with those grants, are you referring to the obligations that we have because we're receiving the grant?
Yes, yes. The obligation to provide services and like, for example, the majority, the largest item there is professional and contract services, which they enter into agreements with others to provide part of those services. And you see all these line items because of different bars, numbers are required to be used when they're paying those expenses. I'll move on. Any questions, or you want me to slow down, or? It's okay, I'll move on. Then we had an adjustment, but it's an in and out on chemical dependency and mental health. These were the adjustments that we did in the general fund to adjust for actual payrolls. And so there's going to be $25,000 less of transfers out on that fund. And then on the health department revenue, this is just basically between line items. They've moved the 10,725 between two different line items. And then the health department has a lot of lines that they're moving the expenditures between different bars. It looks like a lot, but it zeroes out to zero, all those changes. And again, this is, they're just adjusting items for the placement where they were originally put in the budget and moving them to where they should be now in this budget. And that's on page 7 and 8. And then on the bottom of page 8, the sheriff's crime reduction task force or team, they're moving funds to cover some additional meals, mileage, tuition for some new members for mandatory training to be certified, and they're reducing their fund balance by $10,000. In their boat on page 9, under boat safety, they're increasing some expenses, but the adjustment is grant funding is also additional grant fundings coming in for $6,640. Low-income housing expense, it's movements between line items. It's $1,000 reduction of, actually an increase in fund balance. Law and justice funding, this is to account for some rugged laptop contributions to IT. And ARPA, this is where we're reducing ARPA line items so that we could pay the parks and wildlife. I'm sorry, why did I say wildlife? Parks General Fund. Then when we go down further on page 9, we have solid waste maintenance. This is fixing an error from the original budget load. The budget was entered at 20,000 and it should have been 250,000 for utilities. So we're reducing the fund balance by $230,000. And then for emergency management fund, the making some adjustments. Primarily, the big item there is summer help that was approved by the board. And then page 10 has our cafe, the transfer in from general fund. Information technology, this is, they wanted to increase, they also needed to increase their budget for summer help, because instead of one, they're receiving 3 summer help positions. And so they basically have done that, and they're reducing their fund balance by $26,895. And then because at the time of budget, we didn't know if we were doing an equipment replacement fund in the sheriff's office or in IT. So now we're accounting for that item that we need to expend this year. It's time to replace their rugged laptops, and that's $491,510. And we had accounted for it in the fund balance, so. And risk management, some minor items, moving some things around, some expenditures. And then industrial accident, we received some revenue that we didn't anticipate in the budget for a workman's comp audit. That was $6,097. So it affects revenue and it affects ending fund balance. And then the last item on page 10 is the liabilities claims for 153,351. This is to budget the recovery funds that we're going to receive for the annex. And then we also wanted to increase the expenditure line for the annex as well. And that's all of my budget amendments. During my budget amendment, we'll also be asking to dissolve the purchasing fund. There was a purchasing fund in the service department, and it dates back to when they had a print shop. And so they had at one time had the mail center, the print shop, and maybe something of purchasing's in there. It's no longer needed because purchasing is in the general fund and mail services is in the general fund. So there isn't any revenue coming into that fund any longer. So we need to dissolve it. And part of that dissolution will be an entry for the petty cash, because the petty cash had originally resided in that fund. So, and one other item, I'm not sure if I'm going to get signed contracts back on a couple of the rural public facilities grants that y'all awarded a couple in April. I'm trying to get those contracts out and get them back in. But I may have some, we'll know by tomorrow. So, and we'll put them in agenda quick tomorrow if we get them back. And that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that covers all agenda items that we are aware of at this point in time. Okay. Jessica?
Good morning, Jessica Warren, Human Resources. First request I have today comes from Public Works. They're requesting to fill their purchasing specialist position. This position was vacated at the end of January, and they've looked into the position and, reworking some job description changes, and they're ready to fill it.
So we reworked what they want this person to do a little
Just
bit?
reevaluating the job description.
Okay.
That's why it's been open for a bit.
So now they're happy with it and ready to fill it. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the next request comes from Health Department. They're requesting to fill a public health nurse position. The employee put in her notice and her last day will be the end of May.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay. And then the other item I have is an executive session for qualifications of an applicant.
okay. Time-wise?
5 minutes, and I didn't know if you had another executive session.
I do, but I'm
request.
not sure how that works.
Okay,
I have one, that I'd like to talk about, performance of a public employee. 5 minutes.
Okay, we got 2 executive session requests, one for qualifications of an applicant, 5 minutes, and one for performance of a public employee, 5 minutes. We will adjourn to executive session. Okay, back from executive session, no decisions rendered. Anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn? No meetings the rest of this week. We will, and then a holiday next Monday. So next time we'll be in session will be next Tuesday, the 27th. Okay. See nothing else. We will adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.